Okay, that's us. That's us just
All
live then.
right.
So let's go. I am here with Cara Goodwin. Cara is a meditation master, podcast host of the Meditation Conversation, Reki Master, and for this interview, I have dubbed her a dimensional hopper. A bit like myself. That seemed to be the most kind of appropriate term to any introduce you. So yeah, Cara, normally I kind of start with introducing myself, but I don't understand why I do that when most people who are going to tune into this know exactly who I am. So we'll just skip that bit. Cara, hi, the hell are you?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Such a joy to be here.
Brilliant. Well, as I said, I gave you a bit of an introduction there, so I'm hoping people are going to be a little bit curious as to who you are, and I'm hoping that some lovely people join us either in the studio or on YouTube anyway. But regardless, anyway, this interview will be going out afterwards. So, Cara, you weren't always like this. You weren't always this Zen meditation master, podcast host extraordinaire, dimensional traveler, and Reiki master. I know from my research is that after you left uni, you started working in IT industry. You were an IT pro for a big pharmaceutical company for about 15 years. And then you moved to the IT consulting and then sales for IBM. So if you could tell us a bit about that, and then obviously maybe potentially you moved on to Italy, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've done great research and given a great high level introduction of where I started. So just as you said, I was a very what did they call them in Harry Potter, like a muggle? Are you a Harry Potter fan? Anyway, just a regular, corporate person. And I have two children. So, and I'm married. So I just was going around in my regular life where I was doing the corporate job and raising kids and having pets and all of that. And I've always been kind of interested in spirituality from kind of a broad sense. So if I saw, a book on reincarnation or something, I'd be very drawn to it. But I didn't meditate. I didn't really have a lot of time really to nurture that part of myself. And eventually we moved to Italy and I stopped working at that point. And so that really gave me time where if I would have wanted to really start to explore more things like spirituality, I would have done that. I did pick up some hobbies that I didn't really have a lot of time for before, but I still wasn't really making meditation or spirituality a big part of my life. I didn't really have an environment that was very conducive to that. I didn't like the people that I was around weren't interested in it. So there wasn't really much pushing me in that direction apart from just that natural curiosity that I always have had. And then we had 1 year when we lived in Italy. We lived there for 4 years. And 1 year in particular, my life just turned upside down. Really out of the blue. My sister-in-law had been suffering with depression. You mentioned about Michelle, and Michelle was my sister-in-law, really, really close, dear friend of mine. And she had been depressed and she ended up taking her life. And that was really shocking. And so we were dealing with that. And in the course, so that happened in May. And between May and November, I'll just list out the series of events that just fell on us. Our dog died shortly after Michelle. My stepdad was having a neurological issue and ended up having an operation on his brain stem that took a long time and was in the hospital for a long time, or for a while, I should say. my mother-in-law was crossing the street and got hit by a motorbike and ended up in the hospital for a long time recovering from that. And then my stepmom had a degenerative heart condition that she'd been dealing with for years, but she ended up in the ICU and having a heart transplant in November of that year. So, and this is all while we were living in Italy, and my in-laws are in the UK and my family's in the US. So we can't even really be there dealing with it with everybody. We were isolated. So it was a very traumatic time. And it was also just a time where I felt like I was like blowing around in the wind is kind of how I look back on it. Like I just didn't have, it was like, because I was living so surface level, it was like I didn't have anything to really kind of ground me in and remind me what life really is about. Like I felt like life was scary and unpredictable and traumatic. You know, it was just like, and I just felt like there had to be more to it, you know, that this all must have been coming together for some purpose. And I had always been drawn to meditation. It was one of those things, like if I was reading an article, like if I was skimming the news and there was an article on meditation, I would be like, oh, I want to read that, because it felt like there was some key to this meditation thing, that like people who did it accessed information that was, you know, beyond kind of what we have access to through the intellect. And so I understood that it was very interesting, but I had tried to do it a few times and didn't really know what I was doing. So when this year happened, I was like, okay, I'm going to start with meditation because I just don't know what's going on and I need something. And so that was kind of my go-to. And so I found a teacher and I found a method, because the important thing was like, how do I actually do this so that I'll keep doing it? Because that had been such a hurdle for me. You know, I'd try it for a week or something and I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel any difference. And I, again, like just blowing around in the breeze, like, well, I'll put that back down because that's not doing anything for me. So through finding actual techniques, that was such a key for me. And then from that, it was like away I went. I really approached it from a very secular standpoint. I didn't pray as part of my meditation. I wasn't like really trying to connect with my higher self. It was a very, very grounded, very like worldly, like I just need to like remember what calmness feels like and that kind of thing. And I even went to a healer maybe a year after I started meditating or something like that. And she said to me, like, you don't pray. Why don't you pray? And I was like, why would she think I don't pray? You know, like that's really funny, because she knew I was a meditator and she knew like I was taking this course on opening my heart, you know, and all this stuff. And I'm like, why would she assume that I don't pray? You know, of course she wasn't. She was going, your heart's not opening as much as it should. And I'm getting why that is. And so, you know, ultimately I did take up praying and kind of definitely opening myself up more and more. But it certainly didn't start that way for me.
Brilliant. You know, one of the kind of common, where's that echo coming from? One of the kind of common denominators that I find with spiritual people, certainly in the people that I'm in contact with on a kind of regular basis, but also doing research and interviewing people, is that they all seem to be through some sort of trauma. They all seem to have suffered some sort of trauma, big or small, one major event, a number of small events. And I can certainly say this has been true in my life. I've suffered some big traumas, but I guess that these traumas are kind of designed to wake us up, you know, to stop us identifying with the world around us, the world that we see every day, and to start making us do the inner work and searching for answers on a kind of bigger and cosmic scale. And it's then that you begin to open up to this kind of larger life that was hidden from you. Certainly my own experiences have helped me like that there. Before I kind of woken up, I was completely unaware of this. I know looking back throughout my life, I had interests in kind of like the more kind of esoteric and sort of spiritual things, and books on meditation and hypnosis, and like I had a book on self-realization by a god of a Hare Krishna, without really kind of paying attention to it. And then later on, kind of maybe in my 20s, maybe a bit later, I downloaded like 180 ebooks on philosophy and out of body experience, never really reading any of it. But I kind of buried all that part of myself until one day I'd kind of came into contact with someone who I later found out was a medium. Knew nothing about mediumship, knew nothing about psychics, didn't even think it was real. So it was a massive shock to me. And I kind of opened up without even understanding what was happening to me, because I'd never felt anything like that before. I'd never felt, why can't I focus? Why can't I concentrate? What has happened to me? Have I been drugged? And it was only kind of understanding, well, that's you opening up, that's like what we would call spirit or spiritual entities, or the spiritual energy coming into you, that I understand. And it was just such a revelation to me. Now later on, obviously, that was my first awakening, but kind of searching and wanting as much growth as possible, because I think in those early days, you're very hungry, you're very eager, you're throwing yourself into so many different practices and research. And I was kind of like, well, I want the most growth that I can. And it was then that I had a massive trauma that fundamentally changed my life. But it was there then that I found that my kind of opening up took a massive upward spiral, and it all kind of kicked off for me with the development of the things that we were talking about just before we started there. So I'm just kind of wondering, in a long-winded way, what your thoughts on trauma and spiritual awakening and growth are.
I agree with you 100%. It does really feel like the one of the pathways to awakening is trauma, and that's one of the connections that I can see looking back in my own experience, where it was like I had such a comfortable, I loved living the Mediterranean life, like making time for coffee after I dropped the kids off from school. And, you go down and it's very leisurely. And I was really, really enjoying that. And there really wasn't, and even though I innately had this interest in spirituality, so I may be reading, like I said, like books on reincarnation or books about children or remembering their past life experiences. I remember that was I read several books like that just fascinated me before I truly awakened. I'd go that far that I'm like, okay, some of the leisurely books that I'm reading are in that vein, but I wasn't doing anything to really propel it. And it's not, there are, of course, instances where people are literally walking down the street and they just have a Kundalini awakening, but that is traumatic for them because they have no idea what just happened. They've got all this power that just came into them and they can't make heads or tails of it. Their life just shifted but they were walking down the street. And that in and of itself is a really difficult thing because you can feel like you just lost your mind. I again, looking back, I recognize I was having little physical things that were happening that were awakening, parts of my awakening that I didn't know what was happening. Like I was seeing things in my field of vision, like checkerboard patterning that was rotating, and it was just in my peripheral sight, but like continuous. Like I went to the hospital for it because eventually, like I had a friend who was an what do you call him? The optometrist.
All right. Okay.
And her husband worked at the hospital also as an optometrist, so they got me an appointment. Again, like I'm in Italy, I don't know who to go to, and they were looking at my macula and all kinds of stuff because she's like, she knew I was a runner at the time. And she's like, don't run just in case, like you're having some retinal separation and all this stuff, because I'm describing these things. I'm like, sometimes it's like a checkerboard pattern or like a chessboard, drafts board, I think you'd say. Sometimes it's like different colors, but and I had no idea what was going on, but it happened for weeks. And, they saw something in my macula, but it was pretty inconclusive and it ended up going away. But I was like, I don't know if I'm having like a brain tumor or something. So in my field of vision, I was seeing this. Well, now I understand, or the way that I understand that is that was an energy, things were opening up, new neural wiring, I'm not sure exactly what the cause of that was, but I believe it was energetic, and it was right on the heels of everything that was about to change. I mean, literally, when my sister-in-law passed away, my husband went straight away to London, and I didn't go. I went to the hospital the next day. Like, that's when my appointment was to go and be checked. So like literally this was all happening all at the same time. I think I may have just kept enjoying like where I was in my life, and like, why upset the apple cart? It's like, let's just keep having like our cappuccinos in the morning and waiting for the kids to come home from school, and, just enjoying the streets of Bologna. It's not a bad way to be. But because I had this, like, suddenly my life was unrecognizable, and I needed like something deeper. That was the catalyst for me. And I don't know that I would have actually started exploring it deeply and going into it really deeply if I didn't feel like I didn't have a choice,
Yeah, fantastic. Would you say that you're one of the lucky ones potentially? I know that because of the energy shifts on the planet at the minute, I call it the green ray energy, heart energy, coming in. There's so many people who are, as you say, undergoing Kundalini awakenings, being forced to do the inner work, that have absolutely no idea about any of this here. And as you turn around and say, they're going to psychiatrists, psychologists, thinking that there's something wrong with them and looking for a physical explanation to this. And then there are some people who, for me anyway, rather than embrace this, are completely rejecting it. And as a matter of fact, actually, what's the word? Becoming more retarded, becoming backwards, regressing away from that kind of spiritual awakening or heart-based energy. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I do want to touch on that kind of later.
Yeah, that's a great point, to be awake kind of as all of this is going on. It really, yes, I would say it's very fortunate, because there are so many different ways to perceive what's happening, or to not even notice what's happening, or to not even accept what's happening. I do definitely appreciate having a different viewpoint for, particularly, so, putting aside my own things that I went through years ago, we all have gone through stuff the last 2 years together and individually. But, to be able to be, the word that's coming to me is above it, but that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound sounds very arrogant, but just like to let it be happening and not let it be like really coming in and really altering kind of how, altering my own peace and my own, because I now am at a place where I understand that this is just one expression of something much, much bigger that's happening. And this is already a temporary expression of that. So it's kind of a, like, what can I do with this? I mean, it's an honor to be here right now. To your point, it's like, from what I understand, I love hearing people talk about, this is the greatest show in the cosmos right now is Earth. Like, everybody who's not here is watching what's going on here. And so how amazing that we are here, and that even though it's not like this beautiful play of having our cappuccinos every morning in the streets of Bologna, but it really is an honor to be able to go through it and to be able to witness it from a different perspective, one of opportunity, and trying to help people to change their perception as well, and to use it as a tool and to use it as an opportunity. Really, yeah, I agree. It's very fortunate.
It is, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it's fortunate, because we all know that I don't know where this feedback's coming from. We both know that the inner work is hard sometimes. It's really hard, and sometimes we just want to carry on, especially if we're in those happy periods where things seem to be sailing, where we're sailing into the wind rather than against it. And and those times come along where you recognize that I have more work to do, or there's more energy shifts going on. It's not easy. And I think that maybe just people need to kind of be aware of that a spiritual awakening, spiritual growth is not all a bed of roses. It's difficult sometimes. And sometimes we look at those people in life who are just breezing through life and having their cappuccinos during the daytime on the streets of Bologna. And you kind of wish sometimes that I wish that was me again. But I think that once Pandora's box is open, it can't be closed again. This is it. This is me. I can't go back to that life.
Yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So let's talk about, sorry for interrupting you. Let's talk a little bit about your development, because I know you've mentioned that, you spent time learning different meditation techniques, and you were immersed in Yogic philosophy as well. And kind of what you've done is looking to pair these ancient yoga techniques with modern science. So like self-realization with brain activity and the body. I'm kind of wondering, could you talk about that? Just because I've obviously read and listened to the autobiography of Yogananda, and they talk about his guru and his guru's guru, and this kind of blend of religion and philosophy and techniques such as Kriya Yoga and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, could you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my gateway, was Yogananda. So I read, like, just at the very beginning of my awakening, found autobiography of a yogi, really, really was intrigued by it, and managed to find, like, even as the book was coming to an end, I was like, I want to learn these methods, because he had such a scientific approach. He was like, this is like, if you follow these methods, then you can control your system, and you can access different things within your system. So I managed to, because again, this is while I was still in Bologna. Should I try putting on headphones? Do you think that'll help?
It's probably me, I think, seems to be more of a thing. But if you're getting feedback at your end,
it's okay for me. It's not bad, but I'm not hearing it when you do it. So
sometimes whenever I think it's this room, I need to get a different room in order to broadcast from. But this is kind of the best room available at the minute. Sometimes I get feedback, and sometimes I'm not. So it just seems to come and go. But we'll persevere.
Okay. I think it's okay. But when you mentioned it, I started noticing it. But so anyway, yeah, I loved his story, and I love the teachings that he brought. So he founded the Self-Realization Fellowship, and I really wanted to learn. You mentioned Kriya, this Kriya technique that he teaches. I wanted to learn that, but again, I was living in Italy at the time, and they had like a mail-in program where if you wanted to follow this path to learn the technique, you had to like receive these mail-in instructions and lessons. And I didn't get my mail very consistently at all where we lived. And then there were like international shipping rates. And I was like, well, this does not seem very logical. And I was like, I guess I could start that up, because we knew we'd move back to America. And I was like, well, I guess I could start that up when we moved to America. But I was really hungry. I was like, I just got turned on. Like, I need something to feed this. So, so I know what to do with it. So I found another organization, and they had a big online presence, and they were a smaller organization, but you could learn all of the methods and techniques and take that path to learning Kriya online. So I did that, and I am a Kriya Bon. I use Kriya every day. And I was involved with that organization for a while. And that was an interesting step on my path because, again, I was very new to really becoming awakened. They were all centered on Yogananda's teachings and techniques. Those are timeless in their way, but he also died in 1952. And so as I started having deeper experiences where I was, I'd see like flashes of symbols, like when I would fall asleep, like I'd be starting to fall asleep at night and I'd see these like flash, 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 like rapid flashing of different symbols. And I was like, what in the world is that? And that organization, well, for one thing, they kind of had this foundational thing of like, you just don't talk about, if you have any phenomenon that comes up, like you don't talk about it because it can make people jealous or people can start to feel competitive. And that is true. You don't want to start to getting into like, how big is yours kind of thing, But I didn't have anybody to go. I realized like they're kind of shutting down this stuff. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want me to talk about it. They want me to ask about it. They don't, I talked about it with like a couple of people just to feel it out. But I even felt guilty about doing that because I knew that it was like, we don't talk about this stuff. And eventually that just didn't work for me, where I was like, but this is real, it's happening. And I think that if Yogananda was alive and I came to him, he wouldn't say that like, just because you can't find this in the book doesn't mean it's not real. I think he'd know what I was talking about and he would advise me. But the teachings that are here now as his legacy are for the masses, and they're not for that individual. I'm like, I am sure he told his direct disciples, like if they came to him, that he would totally advise them and not that I felt shut down, but I just felt like I reached a dead end. And so then I realized like I was getting to this point, and this was a really important realization for me because I was with that organization for, I want to say 2 or 2.5 years, something like that. And it became a lot of rehashing. It was like, these are the teachings, these are more or less it's like scripture. And these are what this is what he says. And then, you'd have like a teacher who was teaching what Yogananda said, and then they'd put their own spin on it and how they applied it to their life. But I got to the point where I was like, I already know where this is going. It was like, it really plateaued for me because it really felt like I had exhausted these very rich, it was a really important step, but I had to move on from it. And I was discouraged from moving on from it. Again, there were some people within the organization who were supportive and they were like, I totally get it, keep going. And then but I definitely had others who were like trying to keep me in and like thought that was the only path. That was the only way I was ever going to self-realize. But I recognized within myself that like that thirst that I had was just, it was like I could stay here and just go dry because I'm not hungry for this anymore. I'm satiated from it. I feel like I have what I need from it. And I could stay here because everybody tells me that this is the right path and this is the only path and this is the quickest path. But I feel slower now. Like I feel like I'm dragging through mud because I already know what they're going to say. We've already talked about this a lot in the last lecture I listened to. So I think from that, it is important. I mean, a lot of people talk about, you mentioned that the time that we're in and this, like, you said a green ray time, this heart-based time, we're in an accelerated time. And I've heard many people say the age of the guru is dead. And that, I think, is an important thing for people to consider, whether that is resonant for them or not. I very much rejected that the first few times I heard it, because I was following a guru. Whether he was deceased or not, he was still my guru. But again, I had to listen. That was a challenge for me to listen to that which was within me and coming from within me, that was saying, keep going, keep going. And I had to, and there has been another instance even since then, where I kind of got lured into an organization that was very flashy and very seemed to have these very high teachings and advanced teachings and mystery school this, and I was like, oh my God, big, bright, shiny object. This is amazing. Look what I found, and then that also ended up being two living teachers, really trying on the guru kind of outfit. And ultimately I had to recognize what was happening there and leave that as well. So we do want to keep that discernment, keep ourselves discerning, and making sure that we are, something may be the right thing for us as a step on our path, but it doesn't mean that that's where we, build a mansion and we don't move. It's let it be a fluid thing where we keep growing, and watch for those times where we're either being led astray by something that's shiny and looking very golden, but maybe, it's taking a lot from you, energetically or more, or something that, we kind of just get to the end of. And it's if I want to keep connecting to God, I've got to keep this fire lit. And this is not doing that anymore for me. It was a huge ignition for me in the beginning. And then, where am I today? That's an important thing for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, fantastic. Totally agree. It is very interesting listening to you talk about that, because it's something that I have explored and has been constantly in the back of my mind. Is this the next step for me? Should I go and learn Kriya? Could I potentially self-realize? What does self-realization actually mean? Am I self-realized, or am I partially self-realized? We've kind of had discussions around this before we come on and through our conversations. So it is interesting listening to you talk about that, how it's very formulaic, if that's kind of the word. And it does sound very much like the first rule of Kriya Club, is you do not talk about.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
So yeah, it's given me definitely pause to consider. So yeah, I think same with me, as I said, I've spent time developing these various abilities latent within me, but as much as some of them seem flashy, as much as some of them seem great, there comes a point where you either realize, I don't know if this is my path. I think maybe I've outgrown this, or maybe this path just isn't for me. And I've talked about this before. Is it my development as a medium, or a spiritual medium, as a psychic, has been kind of put on the back burner because, well, number one, I'm a healer, and I find that more of a I don't know. It just touches you more. It's something that goes beyond that. It's a very personal, and it's a very privilege to be able to do that and my other things. But I also found that I find that I could potentially be more of service by doing things like this here, rather than going along that path. Even though it sounds potentially crazy to some people, why would you not want to develop along that path? For some people, it just isn't. And for me, it just wasn't. And I found that I'm drawn more towards my other disciplines and to doing this here, because I feel this is more my path. So I think you're right. There are things that can appear flashy, that can appear to be your end goal. But if it doesn't sit right within you, I think it's time for you to move on. You have to use your own discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've mentioned about meditation, and we want to kind of talk more about that. I think meditation helps with you balancing. We've talked about life and tough trials, having triggers in your life. And I think that when you have a words are failing me here. It must be my Alzheimer's kicking in. When you have a discipline of meditation, it helps so much with just about every aspect of your life. You know, you can be grounded, you can be centered, you can be more in tune with your purpose. You've mentioned that through your meditative practices, you become rarely sick, which is pretty amazing. It can help with triggers that we have during the day. One of the things that I always like to talk about is balance. And one of the techniques that I've come across is this kind of balancing technique where if you have a trigger or you have an emotional reaction to something during your day, the key is not to try and shunt it out of your mind. Oh, forget about that and I forgive that person. It's all love and life. It's to bring that experience into your meditation and to feel that emotion, to blow that emotion up, whether it's hate, anger, resentment, anxiety, to blow it up as big as you can, and then to slowly feel the opposite of that emotion, peace, love, harmony, until you find a balance between the two. So I know obviously you are a meditation master and you've found this. So I'm just kind of wondering about your experiences with meditation in regards to all those things that I've talked about, including your discovery that you get rarely sick with your meditative practices.
Yeah, I'm happy to go into that. One of the things that I really lit up when you talked about not shoving away the emotions we don't want to feel, because this is one of the things that as we develop along a path, we can feel like, well, if I'm truly who I'm wanting to develop into, then I will tolerate this and I will not be upset with this person who's trying to trigger me, and there's a difference between suppression and emotional mastery. It's not that we don't feel, it's like we can, and one of the things that you also said beautifully is that trigger. I do find that with a meditation practice, there is bigger pause between the trigger and the response. But I live with a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, so I cannot sit here with a straight face and tell you I don't get triggered. I'm like, bless you if you are a parent or anybody who's living with children and or with anybody else and you don't get triggered. I mean, really, that is phenomenal. But I have buttons and I have people in this house who know how to push them. Yeah. But there is definitely a difference between, before I found meditation and now, I can have a greater pause. My reactions, I don't let myself just get stepped all over, so just in the name of peace, it's like, no, they have to be accountable and they're not allowed to talk to me however they want to and so forth. But it is that kind of, there are lots of different pieces that come into it, one of which being that like overarching bigger view of what's going on here, when I can be in that and be like, okay, he's 14, he's developing his brains, I can have time to like consider all of these rational things. But I love that what you're talking about, like when you're really feeling something uncomfortable or something that you don't like, something that you think is ugly about yourself, that you're feeling jealousy. I feel like jealousy is one of those that's like, just, who wants to feel that? Who wants to fess up to feeling that? But it's like, okay, feel it and recognize it and let it be seen so that you can notice that it's happening and not not push it away thinking that it's something wrong with that person, because that's what we tend to do. It's like, oh, look at what she's doing. Oh my God. It's like, well, really, is that what I'm feeling? Or is it really like, oh, I wish I thought of that, or whatever it is. So it's like, give yourself that opportunity to feel it. Like, oh, I don't feel comfortable. What is that? And then it's letting that come through, letting that process, letting it rise to the surface so that it can then be seen, be released, and it doesn't keep a hold of you. Because when we experience something like, let's say, jealousy, we're just like dismissing it. Nope, that can't be jealousy because I am so above that. Then it's like, it's still there. You didn't prevent it from coming in. You just didn't process it. So it's still, now it's in your energy field, and it's landing wherever it's landing. And if it doesn't get processed, we know what happens, which is it creates a blockage, or it starts to manifest as some kind of mysterious other thing, whether that's a physical thing, or whether it turns into some sort of anxiety, or however, it manifests. But it doesn't just disappear. It just stays there, and it affects us. So it is really important to be straightforward and to be accepting of who we are. And it doesn't mean that we go, oh, I'm jealous and that's cool, so now I'm just going to go and tell, and do something that, a lower version of you would do, to deal with that. It is like recognizing it, seeing it, processing, and holding that, that maturity about it, and using it as a tool. About a month ago now, I was meditating, and finally, it took me like 3 days to recognize that I had been feeling anxious. And I'm not a hugely anxious person, so it's not like a hugely familiar feeling for me, but I knew that I had felt off for about 3 days, but I couldn't quite get my finger on it. And so I was in meditation. And it's, again, like in meditation, it's not like we're really trying to think, we're really trying to go beyond thought, but thoughts come in, this is just how it is. So, and it dawned on me, like I felt it, I could feel within me, like I'm a more kinesthetic person typically, where I experience things more through feeling, like from beyond the senses, extrasensory kind of thing. And I was like, what is this? I've been feeling this. And I'm kind of like rationalize, like, am I angry about something? Am I sad? Am I worried? And I was like, oh, it's anxiety. Like, I feel anxious. And I didn't know why I really felt anxious. I think it's some of the energetic stuff that's going, I think it was bigger than me, because I didn't necessarily have something that I was like, oh, this is why. But once I recognized it, I was like, oh, okay. And then, like you're talking about, I was kind of amplifying it. I was feeling it. It was like, where do I feel it? And okay, here I see you, and now let's go ahead and move this out. And through meditation, we start to get more adept at understanding our energy and moving our energy and working with it. And so then but it takes recognizing it. It takes being real about what's actually in front of you and what's happening. And it was such and just acceptance of, like, it's okay, because nobody wants to be anxious. It's like, well, I'm peaceful all the time, so what does it mean if I admit that I'm anxious, but it was just like, oh, that's what this is. Yes, that's what this is. Okay. Now I can work with it, because I can understand it a little bit better, so I just loved that. I think that's so important that we do that. And then you mentioned also about the not being sick very often. And that was something that happened pretty quickly after I started taking up a regular meditation practice. I used to get sick at least a couple times a year, and it was this continuous chest respiratory infection. Every year, sinuses, like where I would cough and it just wouldn't, I would have a cough for like a couple of months. every single year. And that was like baseline. And then I could have other stuff going on, you know, regularly, but I would always get some sort of respiratory infection kind of thing. And sometimes I would get it twice. Like sometimes I'd get it in the summer too, because most of the time it was in the winter. And when I started meditating, I realized like a whole year came and went, and I was like, oh, I didn't get sick this year. That's cool. And I was doing like a neti pot and stuff because I really went the yogic direction to start with. So I think the neti pot helped also. But you know, I was living in a medieval city, like in the heart of a city with a lot of pollution, a lot of cigarette smoke. Like if you walked in porticos. So we had all these porticos, and it combined with this exhaust pollution, cigarette smoke, like the air was known to be really poor in the city that we lived in. And so that was pretty remarkable to not have gotten sick for a good year. And then when we moved back to America, I did get sick. I remember like as soon as we landed here, just all that stress and everything with that big move. I was again, just a cold, but it broke my streak. You know, I was like, I haven't been sick in a year and a half or whatever it was, you know, 2 years. And but then I hadn't been sick again. I did get COVID at the end of 2020. I mean, if the test was correct, I came up, I had some like tightness in my upper chest. And I noticed that when I was climbing the stairs, it was like I was a little bit out of breath when I got to the top of the stairs. And I had to run a workshop, and it was going to be live in person. And I was like, I'm just going to get tested just to be sure, because I can feel something. I didn't really feel sick, but I felt something in my chest. And you could tell I was kind of like, you know how people sound when they're congested. And it was positive. And so I ended up doing the retreat online, but, or the workshop, but, it was very light for me. I didn't have a lot. And then I haven't been sick again until that. So that was in 2020, the end of 2020. And then I got some sort of a congestion thing in November and it was reminiscent of how it used to go. 'Cause it was like a lingering cough, that lasted for several weeks. And I tested negative that time for COVID. So, but who knows? I don't know. Like that seems to be one of the symptoms that happens with COVID, where, you know, you get this cough, but then again, like I used to get that all the time, like every single year I would get, so it felt very familiar, but again, I haven't had it for years. So that's been my experience. And I don't really know fully like what to attest to that, like what the actual reason for that uptick in my health has been. But I know that I'm deliberately bringing more vitality, more life force. You know, that's part of my meditation practice, is like connecting to source and really like opening myself up to consciously bring in more energy into this body. And so I'm sure that is having some effect, but it's kind of hard to quantify that or to explain that and not sound like a crazy person. And I take a lot of supplements, like you said. I mean, that has been more of something that's come up in the last couple of years. I think I wasn't even taking vitamins for a long time, but then I started taking a vitamin, and then now I take like, half a dozen supplements every day or most days. So that doesn't hurt too.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. One of the things you mentioned there just before we move on was, goodness me, this is terrible. Was we were talking about having triggers and stuff like that, and I think that sometimes when I'm out and when you're interacting with people, especially when you're maybe doing one of your workshops or giving advice, and you come away, you can feel like Jesus himself, so holy and so spiritual. Then you come home and you interact with a loved one, and it just bang. It completely knock you right off, doesn't it? There's something about your loved one, that familiarity with them, that they just push your buttons so much. So I just wanted to mention that. It's something that I've come across, been feeling quite pleased with myself until I come home and you left them socks lying there, and you're immediately that vibration has just brought you straight bang to earth, and from going from this ascended master vibe right down to this,
It's like, wait, I have to be human again? That was really fast.
It's finding that balance, but yeah. And the other thing you mentioned, I'm hoping we have a wee bit of time to talk about that, is this recognition of the changes, the emotional changes within you. I guess you're absolutely right. I've talked about that myself, is that we don't realize what has happened to us, or we don't realize we're out of balance until we're halfway through the process. A kind of analogy I like that came to me was like those wave machines when you're at the pool, you have your back to them, or even if you're at a beach, you don't realize the wave is there until it's actually on you, and then you're all right, okay. But you're absolutely right. It's important to bring that to awareness, to recognize it, to acknowledge it, and go, okay, this is where I am. This is where I am. I've tried different things. Oh, I'm going to think positive thoughts. No. I'm going to put on some music to lift my vibration. No. I'll listen to some humor. No. I'll try different things. None of it works until you actually acknowledge and recognize and accept that, okay, this is the position that I'm in. This is the vibration that I'm in. Now that I've accepted that, it's a relief. How do I work through it? So you're absolutely right. And hopefully we'll talk about where those feelings come from, whether these energy shifts or whether they're just local to us. But moving on, because you did mention about not getting sick, and I'm wondering if your Reiki healing has anything potentially to do with this. I'm wondering how you got into healing. I'm kind of a spiritual healer, which is a bit different from Reiki healing, but I know that Reiki healing is you're consciously sending healing to points in the body, and you're greatly increasing the innate healing within that body. And one of the fascinating things that you mentioned on your website, where you and Reiki healing, along with spiritual healing, works on all living things, not just people, including trees. And you have a fantastic example and different before and after pictures of you bringing your Reiki healing into contact with this tree that was dying. Could you talk briefly about that?
Yes. Yeah. So I do use, my foundation for healing is Reiki, as you mentioned, but it kind of quickly became its own thing. So with Reiki, there's an initiation, there are attunements. And so I've had those, which are, they really help to open you up. And there are symbols that you use. So every time I do healing, every time I do like a proper healing session with somebody, I do use those Reiki symbols also. But there's also like the way that we're taught to do it, which it quickly kind of morphed in my own experience of like, okay, that's good. And then for me, it's like this, like sometimes I'm making different connections, like, I'll be working on the heart space, and then it's like, okay, I have to go also up to the crown, and then I have to picture a pyramid. And I, like just stuff that is like, I'm not sure where this is coming from, but seems to be what wants to happen. And so I always like to just make sure that it's clear especially with clients, because some people are like really, really curious about Reiki. And I'm like, okay, I can totally just do a Reiki session if you want pure Reiki, or if you want like, the Kara special, then I can do whatever wants to come through kind of thing. But the tree, was really beautiful, because we live in a place where the soil is not great. It's a lot of clay. And this particular tree was like, and it's on my website under the healing part of the menu, but it was, I think it was June when I took the first picture, and there are like some full grown leaves just like sprouting in random places, but there is like a lot of bare space that hadn't really even budded or anything. And so where I live, the houses are very close together also. And so I didn't really go right up to the tree too much. I wasn't like doing the Reiki symbols on the tree. I don't live in like a place where we're all, kumbaya. Like we all get along for sure, but I'm definitely an anomaly. But you can do this all remotely. So I was like in the vicinity of the tree, but I was just giving the tree my focus and sending it healing energy, from a distance. It was most of the time I could see it. Sometimes I would be meditating inside and then bring it into my meditation and kind of work with it. But yeah, I can't remember now how long it was. It wasn't instant, it was like after a few weeks or however long it was, but it was like a fully bloom. It was in bloom fully. So it all filled out, and it was really, really beautiful. And it was a beautiful illustration. Like you say, how it works on all living things. But to have, a lot of times when you're working with clients, it can be hard because they're feeling it and they can tell you. Like I was just working on this beautiful person last week or the week before, and she was having this terrible shoulder pain. By the time she left, she was like, "Oh my God, this feels amazing. Like it feels so good." But I can't see it. I can't be like, "Oh my God, look, it grew leaves." But with the tree, it was such an amazing teacher because I could physically see the impact of the energy that was being sent to it. So it was a really, really important exercise and learning experience.
Brilliant. I think you're absolutely right. When we're doing our healing, we don't get to see the results of our work, or if you want to call it ours. We only have that person to give us the feedback. So to see a visual representation, or to see, that it actually brought or manifested into a format where you can actually see the benefits of it is absolutely amazing. And it must have lifted your vibration immensely. It really must have.
Absolutely.
So I want to get on to things, because I'm aware the time of the essence is here. You do a meditation, your meditation conversation podcast, and listening to some of them, you talk about just about everything that I talk about: aliens, mysticism, health, art, music, spiritual authors. And I guess the thing about spirituality is that it's not just something that you turn on and off. It's not something as you rightly know, well, I'm here to do my Reki healing, or I'm here to do whatever, here to do meditation or give this demonstration. And that's it, I'll go back to my normal life. It encompasses everything in your life. You can have a spiritual conversation about absolutely anything, because everything that we do in this life is geared towards our spiritual advancement. So it's just really interesting, and listening to the different guests that you have on. I guess that's why you have all these different guests on, because you would have that kind of outlook in life that everything is spiritual, whether it's music, art, writing, aliens, mysticism. I also know that you have a Learn to Meditate program, which encompasses 21 days, which you give daily videos, guided meditations. You do step-by-step guidance, mantra, visualization. You also offer retreats. And I know that you worked with harmonic sound immersion with Michelle before her passing. Sacred ceremonies. You have a healing hearth and stuff like that. Could you talk about some of them programs that you do?
Oh, yes. Thank you. And one thing I'll just clarify, the Michelle who does the harmonic sound immersions, she is a different Michelle. So she's still around. She's great. And you can find her also on Spotify, Michelle Cresci. She's incredible. But yes, thank you. I have, like we were talking about before, you know, the time that we're in right now, there are so many people who are waking up to these higher aspects of themselves. And I know from going through that it's kind of like, okay, I really want to explore this, but I don't know how. Like, I don't know where to start. And so that Learn to Meditate, that meditation, it's called Meditation Immersion program. That's that 21 day. And the 21 days is really important because it's the formation of a habit. So if you do that every day for 21 days, you're really setting yourself up to be able to, beyond the course, go, okay, I'm used to meditating. It's part of my world now. And then the Healing Hearth it's kind of an ongoing program where we meet live, because the meditation immersion is completely self-paced. So the Healing Hearth is like an ongoing, we meet once a week and we do a meditation, we have a discussion. It's called the Healing Hearth because anytime I guide a meditation, there's a healing element, whether I'm calling it out or not. And of course, healing happens, as you've already mentioned, it happens, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So, you know, we have all these different ways that we can take the meditation to help. It's really about wholeness, you know, healing and wholeness having that same root. That's really where the healing part of that comes from. And then there's like a community forum where we put inspiration and people can ask for guidance or prayers or whatever. But to kind of, anytime we're not meeting, we can still connect. And the retreats are awesome. I'm preparing for the third retreat, which will be at the end of August. And I do those with, the last one I did and this one are with a partner of mine named Michael Massey, who's on the podcast quite a bit. And he's a shaman. And I met him out in Sedona, Arizona, which is a very, you know, mystical place. And so the last retreat that we did, we knew there was a vortex on the site. Are you familiar with like vortexes from the energy grid or from the earth grid? So we knew there was already one on the site before we had the retreat, but we had it during the fall equinox, and we were able to, it just sort of came about that we opened 2 more vortexes, 2 more kind of energetic portal kind of things, very organically. You know, we were kind of called to the fire one night, and just there were a lot of things that started happening, and we were using sacred geometries as a group, and it was very very powerful and very interesting. And what was so interesting, so this is very related to like the tree that we were just talking about, when we get these confirmations, you know, there was a group. So we had the retreat on this site that, and the people, there was, staff supporting us, you know, from a just logistical standpoint. It was their land and they were cooking for us and so forth. And on the last day, the woman who had been my contact, as I'm, you know, doing everything behind the scenes, talked to the group and thanked us for coming, because this was right on the heels of COVID. So they're like, you wouldn't believe how many people have canceled. So we were really, really grateful to have a group here. And what did she say? It was like, and we know what you've been doing. We've been watching in the background and we thank you. And I was like, huh. And then I asked Michael later, I was like, did you tell Dawn what happened last night? And he's like, no, I haven't talked to her. I'm like, I didn't tell her anything, you know. And she just, like, they just knew because they were on the land, and they knew like that things had shifted. And so that was, I mean, what a huge blessing for that to have come through and to have witnessed that and experienced it. It was really, really beautiful. So the retreats are amazing ways to really separate from daily life and and really get into that stillness and get that lift for a longer time, where it can really start to assimilate a lot faster than it does when we're just, doing it bit by bit, a little bit every day. I mean, that's still very powerful. But when we actually take that time to separate, and then especially if we've got some guidance and we've got like some, people who are actually there to nurture that within us. Because of course we're all familiar, well, hopefully most people are familiar with vacations. It's different than a vacation. It's really giving ourselves that time to really get steeped in this vibration, and it can be so transformative and very, very powerful. So that's like usually the highlight of the year for me are the retreats.
Sounds amazing. It really does. And I wasn't aware that that's actually your third retreat.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. I don't know how much time we have left here. So I don't know whether you need to rush on, because we didn't quite get talking about one of the major things, which was our common experiences. So I will ask you though, what your plans are then for the future. What's happening 2022? What's further afield?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know that I look that far ahead, really. I mean, this retreat is probably about as far out as I've looked, and as I'm looking to get more out there, not in terms of being like a weirdo, as I probably already am, but I'm already pretty far out there in that like frame of reference, but really try, because so many people are hungry for this and they're looking for direction and assistance. And there are people out there, but there also are a lot of people out there who are, I don't know, who we need to watch out for. And so I feel like there's this countermeasure, that's needed out there to be like, because empowerment is so important for me, and I really want to help people connect to their higher self, but in an empowering way, where it's not this misunderstanding that you have to go through me or you have to go through a teacher, but rather like get that direct contact. That's so important, and it's not honored so frequently. So that's like a really important thing for me. So I am looking for more ways to help people recognize that and to help them connect to their higher self and to their team, their support system in the ether, and not be subject to that interference, which unfortunately is pretty rampant.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one kind of message that you've learned, one kind of takeaway, one creed or whatever throughout all of your development, through all of your throughout all of your experiences, throughout all of the things that you've done, could you encompass all that? Could you say that there's one key message, one key thing that you could give someone who's looking for a bit of advice, and either viewing this or listening to this?
What a great question. For me, it really goes back to what we were just talking about in terms of the way people see themselves and the way people hand themselves over. That power, there is so much power within every single individual. And somebody may look at somebody like you who have these incredible talents, who, you get these messages from the other side, the veil is thin for you, and they may think like, wow, you're so special, and you are special, but that's not to say that they aren't, or that that's not within them. And that can be such a barrier for people. We have so much conditioning from so many facets of our lives that are misconstruing the reality of who we are. And there is so much to explore within each individual, so much power in there. And it's like, yes, really you who listening, you too. So that's the main thing that comes up right now. You ask me tomorrow, it'll be something different, but right now it seems very relevant.
That's good enough for me. But you're absolutely right there. When I first started my journey, I didn't think I was anyone. I didn't even believe in any of this stuff, and I didn't think I was any. Although I sort of did, if you know what I mean. You kind of always have that. Am I different? But we'll get into that at another stage. Having that kind of secret little tiny place within you, thinking that maybe you are someone different. You are someone special, and it's something that I've come to learn through my own kind of research. Is that for most people who don't fit in, they're generally, well, maybe they're not quite native to this planet, but we'll get into that in another conversation. We'll get into that in another conversation, because I'm really aware that you need to rush on, and I really want to thank you so much for your time. It's such a lovely interview, and I really could have spent another hour at least talking about you, and we've still so much to talk about, especially given our common experiences. So I guess what that means is I'm going to have you back on then, Cara.
I would love that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let me get through some of these other kind of people who have requested a thing, and I'll definitely look at getting you back on, because we could base an entire podcast around our common experiences and some of the other things that we didn't get to talk about. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I've had so much fun. It's been a real joy talking to you, and I really do wish you all the best and all the success in what you do. And I just really do hope that you have so much blessings and so much energy and so much love that comes into your life. And maybe one day you'll get to return to Italy and live there full time.
Yes, right. Well, thank you so much, Zenith. This has really, really been a joy, and you're doing amazing work. I'm so excited that this is just the very beginning for you, because there's so much that you're going to keep providing for people and opening doors and pathways for people. So, and I look forward to next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's definitely through people like you that I learn so much about myself and learn so much about other aspects of my journey. So keep on doing the good work that you're doing, and maybe one day I'll get you join you in your retreat.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks now. Bye, Cara.
Thanks. Bye.